Over my shoulder is the new Lexus RX. Now, in the past few years, almost every new Lexus release has been really impressive because the company has been working on its driving dynamics in a massive way, and the new RX is just the latest in that trend. The old car was really well built and plush, but it was no fun to drive. This one is an entirely different proposition, as I'm going to explain in today's video. The other thing I'm going to do is give you two very strong recommendations about what kind of RX to buy if you decide that this is the right luxury SUV for you. Spoiler alert, one of them is over my shoulder. This is an RX350h Hybrid Luxury with enhancement package, but there's one other model that's also worth considering. You'll have to stay tuned for the rest of the video to find out what that is. As always, I'm going to jump inside first, hit subscribe down below, and let's get started. Chasing cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. Now, I don't want to discount that the previous gen Lexus RX wasn't a good car, because it was a good car if what you wanted was a properly luxurious vehicle that was high quality and wasn't going to let you down. But you had to put up with fairly soggy dynamics, particularly earlier on in that generation. Now, the new one is just not like that. You're still getting a car with classic Lexus, Toyota reputation and likely reliability, but now you're getting a far more modern and chic interior, and you're also getting really good driving dynamics. I'm going to take the car for a drive in just a few minutes, and we'll talk about why that is so. But let's start here inside, because this car that I'm sitting in here, this is an RX350h Luxury with enhancement pack, and this is really what I would think of as a minimum viable specification. It's $5 more expensive than the absolute base model, which is just the straight luxury, no enhancement pack, but you don't want that car. It's got vinyl seats, it doesn't have seat cooling, it doesn't have things like wireless charging. It's a bit of a stripper model, and I would just avoid that. I would definitely tick the box for the enhancement pack because it's $5 well spent. You're upgraded to genuine leather, which is more breathable. It's also perforated. It's still got seat heating, but you're also adding seat cooling, which is absolutely terrific for summer in Australia. It keeps you colder, calmer, happier in the car. You are getting wireless charging, as I mentioned. You get a panoramic sunroof with the enhancement pack. You get a more impressive digital instrument cluster as well, and a few other bits and bobs that makes this the easy sort of entry-level RX to consider. Now, this one is green outside, love that. And we've also got the hazel tan interior, and this looks really beautiful, brightens up the cabin quite a lot. It's a tasteful mix with black, and you have a dark headliner too. So I really like what Lexus has done with the colors of this car. As for the interior design, it's up to the minute. We've got a large, unfortunately, piano black panel here, which is going to get quite covered in fingerprints, but it houses a large 14-inch touchscreen. Now, Australia doesn't get the misery spec 9-inch touchscreen that is the base grade in America. We get the 14 inches standard, and it's a really good system. Big touch targets, wireless Apple CarPlay, although only wired Android Auto, but all grades get navigation, DAB radio, Bluetooth. And the base stereo, which is in this car, is a 12-speaker Panasonic unit, which is acceptable. Unfortunately, to get the Mark Levinson stereo, you have to go to the Sports Luxury, which is $20,000 more expensive than the car we're sitting in here. That's a lot of money to spend. You do get stuff like semi-aniline leather and very nice wood or bamboo trim as well, plus a few other features, but that's a big gulf to jump across in my experience. Now, the tech is good, it works pretty well. You got this new steering wheel in a dark gray. It's got these touch sensors, D-pads here, which you actually kind of control through the heads-up display. Thankfully, you can see the HUD through polarized sunglasses, which is actually quite rare. So Lexus has done really well there. The air conditioning works well. The materials are, as you would expect, super plush and luxurious, and storage is good too. Plus, seat comfort is above average, I would say. We've got two-way lumbar and power adjustment across the front seats here. Higher grades do get four-way lumbar, which is even better, but I was happy doing a couple of hours in this car and I didn't start to get uncomfortable. So up front, I think it's impressive. Let's check out the second row. The back seat of the RX is bright, airy, and roomy, particularly if you go for a lighter interior color and the sunroof. There's lots of light back here. It's going to help avoid car sickness. The standard rear air vents are going to do that as well. That's definitely a nice feature to have. But In terms of room on offer, I'm 6 foot, and as you can see, I'm really comfortable back here. And notably, the RX has a much more comfortable back seat than the forthcoming Lexus RZ, which is a similar car to this, except that it's all electric. That car has a skateboard battery under the floor, which drives your legs up in the back. Here in the RX350h Hybrid, obviously the battery is much smaller, and that means it doesn't have to be under my feet. And as such, my legs are supported. It might sound like a small thing, but over years of ownership, it will add up to make this a more comfortable car. However, it has tailpipe emissions, which not everybody wants. Now, legroom is very good behind my own driving position. Headroom's good. Toe room's excellent as well. You could get someone in the middle because the width is still fairly generous for the RX. Seat back pockets, high quality materials, temperature zone, 2 USB-C ports. You're getting a lot of stuff back here, plus a heavy high quality flip down armrest with cup holders. These seats also fold 40-20-40. But what if you need more than 5 seats? Well, Lexus used to sell a car called the RXL, which had a fairly small third row in the back, which was really practical. That's been dropped because there is a forthcoming model coming to the Lexus lineup that will sit above this car, which is going to have 3 rows and 7 or 8 seats. Now, there's a model called the TX, which we think will only be sold in left-hand drive markets and not Australia. But Lexus Australia have dropped strong hints that this car is going to get a sibling in the range with 3 rows, so watch this space. Of course, Lexus already sells the Land Cruiser-based LX, but not everybody wants a heavy-duty 4-wheel drive. Here around the back of the new RX, I haven't even mentioned the lush khaki metal green color that is obviously the paint color you should choose on this car. But the rear end aesthetic is very similar to the smaller new gen NX, which sits below the RX in the range. You get this big light bar that does light up at night, which is cool. Lexus is spelt out in letters. You don't get the L mark here anymore, but you got your badging down here, RX350h. This one's an all-wheel drive, but everything else you see here is the same on the front drive and the all-wheel drive. Now, you get a power tailgate as standard, as you should at this kind of price. That gets out of the way quickly. It reveals a decent sized boot. I'll put the liters up here on the screen now. Remember, you can't get a long wheelbase RX anymore. There is going to be a new SUV, we think, on the horizon soon from Lexus with 3 rows and a bigger boot. But for now, this is all you get until you step up to the Land Cruiser-based LX. Now, I've got a couple of big boxes in here, no issue. You do have a cargo blind, a couple of hooks underneath this boot floor. There's another little box there, and then some hybrid bits and bobs. No spare in this car, unfortunately. But you do get buttons up here to close the boot or close it and lock the vehicle so you can just walk away. When it comes to running costs for the new RX, you're not going to be shocked when I tell you that the 350 Hybrid is easily the cheapest RX to run, and that comes down to its impressively low fuel consumption. Now, I did the same driving loop in all 3 new RX engines, and the RX350h, it used 6.1 litres per 100 Ks, which is diesel-like frugal despite having this petrol electric drivetrain. That means it's going to cost you about $1,800 a year in petrol costs if you do 15,000 kilometers per year. Now, compare that to the RX350 Turbo. Well, I was only able to get 11.4 litres per 100 Ks on my loop out of that engine. 86% more fuel for only a little bit more power. That doesn't stack up to me. But the Turbo Hybrid, the 500h, the most expensive RX, that uses 9.6, which is pretty decent given how much performance that vehicle has on offer. When it comes to servicing, all RXs require maintenance every 12 months or 15,000 Ks. You get 5 years of cut price servicing, $695 per year. So that's kind of on the average to high side. And in terms of warranty, it's 5 years with unlimited kilometers. So I've already driven the new Lexus RX over in California, where Lexus revealed the car for the first time and let us have a bit of a crack on the roads over there. But of course, you don't really know what it's going to be truly like for Australian buyers until you can get the car onto our roads, because we do have unique ways of surfacing roads. We've got unusual cambers, and we've got a lot of really poorly maintained back roads in this country that are going to come up when you take road trips in this car. And so you never really know your final judgment until we can do this. And so I'm excited to be doing it today. And one of the reasons I'm excited is because virtually every new Lexus or Toyota model that we've tested over the last few years has been a pretty significant upgrade over the car that it's been replacing in terms of driving dynamics, mainly ride quality and handling. Lexuses have always been luxurious, premium, plush, and obviously built really well, but it's only been in the last few years where their mainstream models have started to become also quite fun to drive, and that's not really what you expect out of like a large luxury SUV like the RX, but it's what you're gonna get, because I'm pretty happy to be able to say that Lexus has really improved the driving dynamics of the RX compared to the previous car, which was competent, and it was improved by its facelift, which made quite a lot of small changes to the suspension, but it was never anywhere near as good as something like a BMW X5 or Mercedes GLE from behind the wheel. It just wasn't. But with the new RX, Lexus can now be proud to say that they're actually really competitive with some of the best cars in the segment in terms of things like steering, especially in terms of body control, but also a good balanced ride quality that allows you to have these big stylish 21-inch wheels without it becoming uncomfortable or crashy. And that in itself is actually quite a surprise, because in cars like the Mercedes or the BMW in this segment, you really have to option up a expensive optional suspension, usually air suspension, in order to make the vehicle ride properly. Whereas in the RX, I would say the ride quality that comes standard with the car is quite a lot better than what you'd get in an equivalent X3 or X5 without adaptive suspension, and particularly air suspension on the X5, which you really need on that car. So that's impressive, and it also saves you a bit of money. The steering I really like. It's got a very natural, intuitive ratio running through like a nice small steering wheel that feels good in the hand too, and you kind of get the response from the front wheels that you're expecting, and the body is staying nice and flat in the corners, which is something the previous RX was really bad at. It was quite floaty and a little bit wayward actually if you hit a mid-corner bump. The new model is quite a lot stiffer in the chassis, but without becoming uncomfortable in the suspension. And I guess the blend or the balance that Lexus has been able to get this car to in terms of a comfy, plush ride quality, but a slightly more sporty demeanor in the corners is really nice. And I think it matches the way the car looks outside, which is still a bit luxurious, but you could definitely tell that they want to make it a bit more sporty. You've got those big wheels, it looks quite fast standing still, and the driving dynamics sort of match that. So that's the ride and the handling, which are a really big improvement in this car. What about the engines? Well, in today's video, I am focusing on what is going to be the most popular RX in Australia, which is the RX350h hybrid. So this is fundamentally a very similar hybrid engine to what you get in the Lexus NX, which is the smaller SUV to this. Also what you find in the Lexus ES sedan, and then also cars like the Toyota Kluger, RAV4, and Camry. But Lexus gets a more powerful version than the Toyotas. So what we have here is a 2.5 litre petrol 4-cylinder engine, naturally aspirated, and then we've got a hybrid system. So it comes standard with front-wheel drive, but this car is actually the all-wheel drive hybrid, and I think that's the one that you really want. They both have the same claimed combined output, which is 184 kilowatts of power. Lexus doesn't make a claim about combined torque, but it feels like somewhere between 350 to 400 Newton meters to me. But this is a nice hybrid system. It's funny because just as we're moving to EVs, a lot of the time when I'm testing cars, I kind of feel like combustion engines have reached about as good as they're going to get. And I would say the hybrid system in this RX is also sort of in that league, because it's quiet, it's refined, it's powerful. The engine and the electric motors interact well together. There's no clunky transition from when you glide off from the traffic lights in EV mode and then the engine needs to kick in at maybe 40 or 50 kilometers per hour most of the time. It's just handled really smoothly, but yet you're rewarded with incredible fuel consumption. I've been doing a whole bunch of country touring today, as you can see, and I'm getting 6.4 liters per 100 Ks with 184 kilowatts of power, and I think that's a pretty damn good result from a petrol engine. And in town, like I was stuck in a traffic jam before, and I was getting 4.4 liters per 100 Ks, and that is just amazing for a car in this segment. Now, it's powerful enough, I think, the RX350h. It accelerates with authority, it overtakes really well, it will charge up hills on country roads at 110 kilometers per hour. with no issue whatsoever. It can get a little bit noisy if you really rev the crap out of it, but you don't need to, because it's got enough low-end torque that it's happy to just be driven in a relaxed manner. So I think it's a really good engine. The previous RX had a V6 hybrid. In some ways that was appealing, because when the engine kicked in, a V6 kind of sounds a bit better. It had this sort of bassy, slightly mean engine note to it, which was sort of cool, but it never delivered like amazingly awesome fuel economy. Definitely better than a V6 without being a hybrid, but nowhere near as good as this. And if I just accelerate up to 80 now, you know, you can hear it, but it's not thrashy or anything. It sounds absolutely fine from in the cabin. Now, you've got two other engine choices in the RX. There's an RX350, which is not 3.5 litres. It's a 2.4 litre turbocharged petrol 4-cylinder engine, making 205 kilowatts of power. And that's really one for the non-hybrid diehards. It's for people that really don't want a hybrid. They just want a traditional petrol with traditional all-wheel drive and traditional torque converter automatic transmission, compared to the planetary gear set, not a CVT, in this RX350h that I'm driving now. And that's cool. Those people are definitely out there, and I'll be reviewing that car separately. And then there's the RX500h, which is something a bit special. I drove that a few months ago overseas, and we will be doing our own review of the 500h here in Australia. But that combines the 2.4 turbo engine with its own hybrid system, with an electrified front and rear axle, 2 independent control units for much more instantaneous electric all-wheel drive responses, and a whole bunch of other really clever tech. Now, the RX500h is pretty expensive, but it's also pretty powerful. It makes 273 kilowatts of power. It was a bit of a hoot in California, so looking forward to driving that soon. But I think the point is, for most people, the RX350h is totally sufficient and a bit more, which is good to know. Other points about driving the RX: the refinement is pretty good. There's a bit more road noise than I would have expected, and I think that's because we're on fairly aggressive tires, even on this fairly mainstream spec. So we've got 235, 55. So we've got 235, 55, R21 tires here. Bridgestone Alenza. It's a big wheel, it's a big tire. It's going to be a little bit noisy, but no wind noise to speak of. The stereo sounds really good. The visibility and the mirrors, they're really great, so you can see out of the car really well. And I have been testing the semi-autonomous safety stuff a bit this morning too. Just get around this truck. There's the overtaking, effortless. Tuck back in, good visibility. Sorry, the semi-autonomous safety stuff, yeah. The adaptive cruise, it's pretty smooth. Could be a little bit smoother on the brakes, but the lane tracing, the lane centering assistance is rock solid. Lexus has had a few generations to get that right, and you can really tell they have done so, and the car really sticks in the center of the lane nicely, which is going to reduce your fatigue on the highway. But then you can, of course, turn it off if you're on a sporty road like this and you actually want to drive this car and exploit some of that better handling that Lexus has been able to engineer into it. So yeah, I quite like driving this car. So I promised a couple of recommendations for if you decide you'd like to buy an RX. Well, this is a great spec. This is the RX350h Luxury with enhancement package. You'll scrape out of the dealership for under 100 grand drive away if you choose the front wheel drive version, but you're still getting little luxuries like real leather, cooled seats, and a panoramic sunroof, all important in my view. However, the RX500h F Sport Performance, the top of the range car, is expensive, but its performance is astonishing, its economy is acceptable, and it's remarkably agile and worth considering if you're in that part of the market. Those are my opinions. Let me know yours down below in the comments. I do read them all. Make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.